Thank you for coming along. You might be wondering who we are. You might not, 'cause you might have come and saw us over there. Roughly go straight, take a left, you'll see the Tonic Music Lounge. So we are Tonic Music. We are a registered charity establishing good mental health within music communities. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, we provide two programs of mental health support. One, formerly known as Tonic Rider, which provides mental health support to the music industry. And I say industry with quotation marks. And the reason being, it's mental health support for anyone who works in music, whether that's artists, crew, festival organizers, venue operators, promoters, full time or part time. As long as you earn even a sliver of money from music, we provide tailored mental health support to you. And the second program we have is formerly known as Never Mind the Stigma, and that provides mental health support to music fans. So we are the only charity in the UK that provides tailored mental health support to both those professionally engaging in music and recreationally engaging in music. So essentially, backstage and front of house. And within the programs, we provide 4 levels of mental health support, all of it online, free to access for individuals, and in the form of therapy sessions, peer groups, skills workshops, and training courses. Quick introduction about who I am. I know some of you, which is quite nice. Always nice to see some familiar faces. I am Jeordie Shenton. There I am. I don't look any different than I did about 3 years ago. I'm the programs lead at Tonic Music, so I sort of do the day-to-day operations and the partnerships and essentially leading the programs at the charity. I'm also as well a PhD researcher on substance use amongst working musicians. So my kind of academic background is mental health in the music industry. So I have a couple of chapters out there. You might want to buy the books. They're about 80 quid, so don't do it. Save your money. Just get a takeaway instead. But, if you do, worth having a look at the book chapters nevertheless. So when I said about establishing good mental health within music communities, you might be wondering, well, who does that really entail? Yes, of course, it's fans and industry. But if we see this picture here, you can see this is Glastonbury Festival. Not this year because it's not on, but obviously, very sunny day at Glastonbury. And who do we mean by music communities? Well, we obviously mean the artists on stage. In this case, being Glastonbury is probably Coldplay headlining for the 8th time. We also mean the sound team and the lighting team. We also mean the backstage crew, both working for the festival and the touring crews as well. The people working on the vendors, and the biggest circle being, and the security, and in the biggest circle being as well the attendees. So essentially, this is music communities. Music communities is both a combination of consumer and producer in terms of essentially the art form of music. It's a massive community. We don't often really think about it in that sense, but it is important to recognize that we come together in this group as music communities. There's an airship flying overhead. That's novel. And just a quick definition about what is mental health. Here it comes. It's coming to film us. What is mental health? I always think it's good to have a definition of mental health when I do any of these kind of talks and workshops because, we all have varying definition. The most important thing is that everyone has mental health. I don't know if some of you still say, I don't have mental health. You do have mental health. It's a bit like physical health. You wouldn't say, I don't have physical health if you don't have a broken arm. So in the same way, if you're not experiencing anxiety or depression, that doesn't mean you don't have mental health. That actually means you're experiencing good mental health. So everyone has mental health and it changes. We go along from good mental health to poor mental health on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. It's not abnormal to feel happy and content 1 hour and then the next hour feeling sad because life happens, stress happens, things do happen. And it's a very much part of the fuller definition of health itself, where health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, of which the mental encompasses really 3 main areas. Thoughts, what you're thinking. So, for example, this workshop is fantastic. I like it so far. Your feelings and emotions, happiness, excitement, based again on the workshop. And also your behaviors. In this case, you were sitting there nice and quietly watching the workshop. All of these areas contribute to our mental health. So that's why mental health is a continuous process. And like I said, it's very much a spectrum. So we're not talking a binary aspect of yes or no to a mental health disorder, or yes or no to good, poor mental health, good mental health. People can feel well, they can maybe feel distressed, they can maybe experience potential mental health problem, and then also mental health illness. You notice that last one there, that's where we get into diagnosis territory. Before that, you've got kind of more of the run up because it's very much based on the impact of daily functioning. That's the key aspect. A lot of people don't really think of mental health like this. We've got a long way to go to kind of thinking of mental health in this holistic, very much broader approach than something that is binary and something that is based solely on diagnoses. And like I said, all individuals move along the continuum. Again, even those with a severe and enduring mental health disorder, so bipolar, personality disorder, even schizophrenia, which is not talked about enough, very much a stigmatized mental health disorder. You can have a diagnosis with mental health disorders and experience good mental health because it can be treated through medication, through therapy, and it can mean that your daily mental health is generally good. And again, we need to start thinking a lot more wider. So then that leads into the question about who may be experiencing poor mental health at a music festival. Well, again, it's the same. The artists, performance anxiety, might be tour stress, might be risk of losing a record deal. The lighting and sound engineers, again, festival stress, sitting there in really hot temperatures, having to deal with really hot equipment, that's going to increase the stress levels. Your backstage crew, again, lack of sleep due to touring, having to kind of have unsociable hours, particularly in terms of sleep. Vendors, potentially poor sales at a festival can increase stress, particularly how much you have to pay the vendor at a festival. Everyone involved in the festival has to make money. Security could be told, experience quite abusive situations. This happens a lot, security are humans too. And of course, music fans. Now, you might be wondering, the music fans, what do I mean that music fans at a festival might be experiencing poor mental health? Well, I'll tell you tomorrow at 1:20 when I go through the front of house mental health workshop. This one focuses on the backstage workshop. So there we go, there's a little plug in to be coming tomorrow. Okay, but what I want to do is start with the stress bucket because I want to try and do a little quick group exercise, and this should work. This should work. Most people are kind of near someone. They're probably someone you don't know, so you might have to introduce yourselves, but we'll do it. We'll do it. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the stress bucket, particularly if you're under 30, because I think they now teach it in schools. I'm not under 30, so I didn't get taught the stress bucket, but I think it's a really good way of thinking about stress. So the idea is that we all have a stress bucket which can hold and contain stress, and it's filled up here by what we'll say is water. You'll notice a range ups of different sizes. That's because some stresses in life are small. So, for example, I don't know, tripping over at event production show. I didn't do that, by the way. Some stresses are big, such as losing your job, or say, for example, going through bereavement. And these constantly fill our stress bucket on a daily basis. Stress is always there. It's a bit like the UK weather. There's always a rain cloud there. There's very, very few days that we don't have stress. Stress is a part of life. And like I said, it's about kind of the balance and our resilience to that stress. And everyone has a different size stress bucket. So some of us can hold a lot of stress, others can hold less stress. And our stress bucket can change size as we go through life. Sometimes there'll be periods where we can hold a lot of stress, other periods in life we can hold less stress. And then that's, again, normal for our stress buckets to kind of sort of develop in that way. But also, just because some of us can hold less stress doesn't mean we're weaker or anything like that. It's just our individual differences at play. And to release stress, we need a tap. We need to be able to release that stress through coping mechanisms. Now, when we talk about live music is certainly a coping mechanism. Would you agree? With your hands up, you think going to a gig, going to a festival, maybe going to see Take That or Sleep Token or Cliff Richards, Ray keeps performing over here, keep hearing her. It helps. We're music fans, I assume, if we're sitting here. So it very much helps with stress. But what I want you to think about in kind of group, I'm going to kind of get you maybe into pairs or groups. I want you to think about that live music is not only a coping mechanism, but it's also a stressor for those working in music. So what I want you to do, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but we'll work it out. So if I'd like you to kind of form maybe a pair or a group of three, however you want to do it, if you're feeling sociable. And just for a couple of minutes, just have a couple of answers to these questions. What are the positives to working in live music events? And what are the negatives? I'm interested. If we say give it till 34 minutes past, is that enough? Maybe 35 past. If you kind of form pairs, take your headphones off because you won't be able to hear each other. There we go. So maybe a 3, is that a 3? We a 2, maybe a 3 here. Right, okay. I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to work it out. I'm going to go, right. I'm going to go around and ask an answer for each question from one person each. Right. If I go here, what do you guys say? And I'll repeat it into the microphone. Or do I say it into the microphone? Anyway, are you volunteer? Go for it. Give us an answer to a question. Here we go.
So we said for what are the negatives, we mentioned that working late hours or long hours, unsociable hours.
Unsociable hours, good answer. Like it, like it. Oh, it is unsociable as well. Late nights, weekends, 100%, 100%. What about over here? I like how you focus on negatives as well. Interesting. Very good, very good. Who's going to be the volunteer over here to give an answer to the question? Oh, you were volunteered by others. There we go.
It's just like the constant fear of what's going to go wrong rather than if something's going to go wrong. It's like, will it be power, water, Wi-Fi, medical, a band not showing up? Like, something's going to happen for a weekend long event. It's like, but what's that going to be? And that's a constant stress.
Thank you. Constant fears. The what ifs. No one turns up. Ticket dates on the. Oh, I mean, something you don't get in other jobs so much. Those sort of. Almost like a performance anxiety, but not quite. Not quite. Okay. Final group duo. Who's the volunteer? 50. Oh. I think you lost that one.
Maybe working with new people or a bunch of people under very high stress for a long time can get really taxing, and you can really struggle to keep your own mental health in check whilst next to other people who are struggling to do the same. So I think that can be a negative. It's a difficult thing, but it can be hard.
That's one of my favourite answers we've ever had. I like that. We don't often think about that. Don't often think about that we're always working with new people, new artists, new touring crew. You constantly have to meet people. Also, that horrible where you've met someone and then you don't remember as well. That's just like, oh, horrible. You get that at a conference as well, don't you? Interesting. You all went for negatives as well, which is probably more a positive thing. There are positives to working at live music events. That's why a lot of you guys work in live music. That love of music, that kind of thrill of that feeling like success of a show being put on and completed and people going home happy, for example. All of those elements, what you can bring to a community as well. So if you bring a festival, for example, to a certain town, or there's a venue you run and it's in a city that is lacking kind of music culture. So there is very much positives. We want to bring them in here, but very much, very, very interesting what you're saying. I really like that last answer. That was really, really good, really cool. The constant what ifs is absolutely. I go through in one of the workshops we do the kind of anxiety tree of working in music, how you can filter out some of those worries as well. Very interesting. And of course, unsociable hours. Really difficult to make non-music industry friends when you work in the music industry. You're never available for things. Okay, so what the research says is a little bit stats based. So I alluded to earlier that I've written a couple of book chapters, which, an interesting read if you want to try and get some sleep, and works better than a lot of medications. But still, the main thing is what I show is about that there is poor mental health that is statistically, that's hard to say if you're from Suffolk, higher than non-music industry populations. So essentially, in terms of those experiencing poor mental health, the upper limit of people experiencing, this is before a diagnosis, the anxiety and depression is 72% for anxiety and 88% for depression. So that 80%, that is nearly 9 in 10 people working in music experiencing low mood, experiencing depression. That's quite shocking. You don't have these levels of statistics for other occupations. And then with formal diagnoses, you can see it goes up to around the sort of 35 to 40% range. Now, that's quite troubling because what it shows is that people working in music are not only experiencing poor mental health at a very, very high rate, but they're actually not seeking a diagnosis for that poor mental health. And what that means is that there's a real kind of gap in terms of a lack of treatment for people experiencing poor mental health, whether that be medication, whether that be therapy. But essentially, that kind of gap in the difference shows that there really is a resistance to kind of engaging with support. And that might be multiple reasons. So, for example, it might be accessibility. If you're on tour in France, in Germany, in Italy, it's much harder then to visit your GP to get such a diagnosis. You also get that kind of fear of replacement as well. So if you take, say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks off work due to mental health, this industry, because it's made up of a lot of freelancers, it means people have that fear, that what if of being replaced. And that's a big one as well. So it's a real big concern. The research, academic research shows this, and it shows compared to the general population, 4 times as many people working in music experience anxiety, and 2 times as many people experience depression. This has been research conducted over 10 to 15 years. So we know there are certainly mental health concerns within the world of music that we certainly need to address. And so what are these stressors? So we've touched upon some of these stressors, the what ifs, we've touched upon this new one. I'm going to dance to this Ray song in a minute. It's a good song, isn't it? We touched upon that kind of, having to constantly meet new people, certainly unsociable hours. But there is a framework to this. There is a framework about what's going on in the music industry. So there are a series of pre-existing conditions that impact upon poor mental health. Genetics, so our family history. If we have a family history of poor mental health, we're more likely to experience poor mental health ourselves. Our personality traits, sometimes that can contribute to poor mental health, so particularly neuroticism, so kind of a sort of being susceptible to experiencing high levels of emotion. Used to be called emotional stability, but I hate that term. It's not a nice term at all. Also, sensation-seeking traits are very much linked to poor mental health. Childhood trauma, as you would expect, things we go through in childhood impact on mental health. So, for example, bullying at school, massive impact on mental health. And also, let's not forget that people working in music do experience and are diagnosed with mental health disorders prior to working in the music industry. Now, we're doing some research at the charity at the moment, some academic research, where the findings are shown that actually reports of poor mental health are greater prior to starting a career in music than during. So that's quite an interesting thing, because at the moment it's been very much like the music industry is bad and blah, 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 blah. It is, there is stresses, but it's not all the music industry. You have to think of the music industry as very much exacerbating these kind of factors related to poor mental health. But of course, this then leads into actual pressures within the music industry. So we have creative pressures for those musicians, the pressure to kind of create. For festival organizers, you have to always think of new ideas every year, how to get people into a festival. You can't kind of sort of rest on that doing a festival the same way every year. So you have to think of new ways, and there's a pressure. So, sometimes that creative, kind of bucket can empty. Performance anxiety stresses, very much more based on the artist, but it can happen in other forms of work. We have the social, workplace, and cultural pressures. So again, that 24-hour working, very much that kind of meeting new people all the time. The cultural pressures to kind of stay up, the cultural pressures to take drugs, the cultural pressures to drink heavily, the workload pressures, the poor financial, a lot of people working in music don't earn a lot of money. They're very much under that kind of minimum threshold. That's a real big key factor. Identity pressures. So how do you separate your kind of music industry self from your personal life? Because it integrates, and not just in terms of yourself, but also in terms of relationships. Sometimes your work relationships can kind of breaking the boundaries where they become friends. And how do you kind of siphon that? Because suddenly, if that friend suddenly dismisses you from a job, then what happens? It's difficult. It's difficult. So you get that touring family element, but then when the going gets tough, it can fall apart. Fame and celebrity, particularly for those artists, but also, not just for artists, but actually, a lot of people who are non-artists that work in music, generate fame. Even here, people who are well known at conferences, it's a big pressure to have. Imposter syndrome. Anyone heard of imposter syndrome? Hands up. Anyone think it's a big part of working in music? Quite imagine. Yeah, that kind of, I feel I shouldn't be here. I've forwarded the way to this position. All of those elements. These people in the room are, much, much, more successful than me. I imagine some of us might be experiencing it at this conference. I mean, it's such a big thing within the world of music. And all of that builds into emotional turbulence as well. So there's a general emotional turbulence of working in music. And all of these together lead into poor mental health. Again, this is what research shows about how working music, how it happens. You have the pre-existing conditions that then are impacted and exacerbated by working in the music industry. And these are not the only stresses. As I said, there's a multitude of these stresses. It by no means means the music industry is bad. It by no means means you shouldn't work in music, but it's just about having that awareness of these stresses, about, awareness for yourself, awareness for others, awareness of people you're responsible for in the music industry, and about kind of addressing them is a really, really key thing to do. And cognitive distortions play a massive part in what's going on in the music industry. So we touched upon the what ifs one. That's slightly in the realm of cognitive distortions, about kind of, your mind making you think about all the potential worst outcomes, where it goes beyond general risk assessments, where, what happens if suddenly a UFO crash lands on the festival site? I mean, it could happen. It could happen, but, etc. You know, Cognitive distortions are experienced by so many music professionals, such as arbitrary interpretations. So, for example, those people who kind of have the thoughts, my colleagues think I'm a loser. You're kind of making really an interpretation based on little facts. Sometimes you might hear that, and then it becomes less arbitrary. But this is a really big thing that ties in with that imposter syndrome. It ties in with that kind of thinking that people in the room think I'm not good enough. People in the room think I don't have the knowledge and the skills to do this job. But that thought may have just arisen from nothing more than your own thinking and perception. Selective abstraction is a big one. Thinking, for example, I'm a rubbish singer, I'm a rubbish festival organizer, I'm this, I'm that. You're selecting that based on if someone has told you, oh, I'm not sure if you're doing a great job with this. And then what you do is you then start to focus and hone in on that. Overgeneralization. So I will fail at organizing a festival. So if you have one issue that's maybe not even linked to the festival, you can then kind of overgeneralize. Magnification. So I made a terrible error in rehearsals. That's a big one. So again, with a festival. So for example, if you accidentally sent an email out to the wrong person, that's an error, but it's not necessarily a terrible error. So that's a key thing to think of as well. And also as well, personalization. So what can happen is when there are a lot of bad things happen in the music industry, and they do, things go wrong, festivals go wrong, bad weather in particular can impact festival, is then thinking, oh, it always happens to me. And it's not. Unfortunately, we do have to tackle nature in the music festival world, and particularly with what's going on with the climate, with global warming. This is happening more and more, where festivals are having to be postponed or cancelled due particularly to heavy rain. Not got quite to the level of snow yet, but, can happen. But also as well, we might get to a point where festivals might be postponed due to extreme heat. This is something we need to be aware of, and we need to think about this in terms of mental health. So essentially, the main thing here is about how festivals can help their staff at festivals, how they can help their staff, how they can make the environment a lot safer and a lot better in terms of mental health. I'm just going to point out a couple of points, because I think what can happen in the music festival world, and also with music venues, is we're so focused on the customer's well-being and mental health, we forget about the staff sometimes, and we forget about ourselves. If we're organising a festival, we forget about ourselves. And it's really key to have that kind of broader approach. So I want to bring in some things that what can help, that are not budget breaking. These are not things that break the budget, because we have to always balance that, the profits from festivals is very minuscule. So it's no good suggesting, well, festivals should be paying such and such for loads of therapy sessions of people. It's just not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? So we have to be realistic. We have to be more rational than that. So education. So before an event, you can do things to help. So education. So equipping staff with skills to support themselves, their colleagues, and also the wider music community. So again, you would be more, you would imagine you would train your staff about how to support customers, maybe training about what to do when someone's been hurt, for example, or if someone's experienced a crisis. We focus less on about what happens when that's going on with our colleagues. So what you can do is to seek training, seek education stuff. So for example, what we do at Tonic Music, you may have seen at our lounge, we do offer mental health support in terms of mental health training, in terms of mental health first aid and suicide first aid light. Now that's really good, because that's really important, because our facilitators for that do work in music. So these are not facilitators from outside the music world, they're from inside the music world. So there's that greater empathy. And it doesn't just have to be mental health first aid or suicide first aid light. It can be in the form of workshops. So kind of, emotional resilience workshop, acceptance and commitment therapy, or healthy thinking workshops. And there's a range of services that offer this. For example, we offer a range of workshops. So it doesn't also always be workshops that you've commissioned from a service. It could actually be seeking charities that offer this service for free, because they are out there. We're just over there, like I said. So that's the first thing. Another thing pre-event is advancing as well. So we're very good in terms of advancing documents, of putting in, where the toilets are and where to go for this person. Sometimes we can forget to kind of put in general mental health information. And that could be about information that is related to the event, or it could just be simply putting in a kind of list of services that teams can reach out to if they do want to seek mental health support, generally NHS, for example, or more specialist services such as Tonic. And you'll see here, we actually created a Tonic Music advancing document. So we do provide an advancing document to music festivals. Most of the time, festivals we work at, but also festivals we don't work at. So, you can just slip that page into the advanced document. If you do need support, here's where you need to go. There's things we can do peri-event, during the event as well. So again, one of the things we do is backstage lounges. Again, this is quite a new thing. There's a few charities doing this now. Backstage mental health support has really only emerged 5, maybe 10 years. I feel it was a bit before COVID. We've always done it welfare for customers, but very much it's about designating areas for all teams, whether that's artists, crew, touring crews, to go and talk to a mental health professional. And again, like I said, we do this around 20 to 25 times a year at festivals. So this is actually one of our mental health lounges that we have backstage. You can see we've got sofas, just a real calming area that's staffed by a mental health professional. Nothing, 3x3 gazebo, nothing major, doesn't take up a lot of space, but just an area where people can go to, where they can just take a couple of minutes out. And for us, we do the rest of the work. We provide the resources, we provide, how to register onto our mental health support. That's vital. And we see when we do this, some artists even do come and use this. And that's key. Because again, at a festival, you've got a range of artists. You've got your headlining artists, that have got the stresses of playing stadiums and arenas. You then got your more, your smaller stages where you've got the pressures of kind of artists who are on the up, and, the pressures about making it, etc. So it's really important to have these areas, but have it for everyone, not just certain members of staff. Resources. So some of you may know we have a Need a Tonic campaign. So for the last close to a year, we've provided free mental health posters to venues and festivals across the UK. We have over 100 organisations signed up now to the campaign. And again, just having these resources available, whether that's a form of posters or zines, makes the world of difference. Just having them in an area such as a toilet, the staff toilets, where a staff member can scan the QR code and go on to seek mental health support, or they can take home a zine which they can put into their back pocket. It makes the world a difference. It makes someone feel recognized, and also it can actually really be impactful just having that zine to take home to reach out for that support. And then post-event, we must never think of a festival as just being like the 3 or 4 day thing. And I know, for those working, that isn't the case, but we must make sure we're still continuing that support post-event. So, for example, one way that can be happen is peer groups. We've done a lot of stuff where we've hosted peer groups for festival staff after a festival. Really, really key, to talk to your colleagues about, what went well, what didn't go well, were there any grievances that you need to discuss, were there any issues? Having that can actually lead to having much stronger teams, much more stronger. You see a nice diagram there, and like I said, it can be based on commissioned peer group, or it can be more of an open peer group. And the other one is therapy, signposting to therapy, not necessarily purchasing therapy, but signposting staff to places where they can seek therapy or they can apply for funding for therapy makes the world a difference, because working at a festival can be extremely stressful, can be extremely traumatic at times. So it's important that, we offer that option. There are services out there. Like I said, Tonic Music, what we do, we provide therapy. It's online and it's by psychotherapists in the music industry. Just informing your teams, informing artists, touring crews that are working with your festivals about that makes the world of difference. So really that brings me to the end of kind of me talking. I'm just going to put on the last slide about our website so you can see a bit about what we do. I'm also around if anyone has any questions at all. That's why I'm sort of giving it like a 3-minute buffer. So that's our website. You'll see that we're on all the social media services. We're not really on X anymore, to be honest. It's more Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Website is there. That's where you can actually register for mental health support through us. All you got to do is tick that you work in music. Doesn't matter how much you earn at all. You'll also find our resources and also how you can have us host a lounge at your event. Wonderful. Thank you so much.